Welcome back to the Live with Grace podcast, where we discuss sports, lessons, and life as athletes, professionals, creators, dreamers, and leaders. I'm Grace Byer, and I'm your host, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Live with Grace podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Peri Sheinin, on the show. She is a graduate from Brown University, where she played tennis and was a three-time ITA scholar athlete. She's the host of On the Rise podcast, which is the first podcast that focuses on the rise of women's college tennis. She served as a play-by-play commentator at Tennis Channel in 2023. She covers college tennis for Cracked Rackets on ESPN digital platforms, and she spent the last 3 years as a sports anchor and reporter at WHSV TV in Virginia, where she worked on several programs, including one called Women in Sports. So welcome, Peri, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Grace. This is lovely, and I'm so excited to get started.
I'm so excited to learn about tennis. You're actually my first tennis player on the show, so congrats. I'm
I'm
excited.
honored.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn about it myself, but also just I agree that it's like a growing realm in the sports industry, kind of similar to women's basketball, like how it's just been growing a lot recently. So I'm gonna start this episode. This is only my second episode of doing this, but I thought that was of just starting with some rapid fire questions. So just answer with whatever comes to your head first. So who's your favorite tennis player to watch?
Her name is Emma Navarro. I actually had her on my podcast a little bit ago. She's top 25 in the world. She played at University of Virginia women's tennis, was an NCAA champion her freshman season, turns pro, and then she's just taken off since.
Wow, I would love to watch her. I've never actually heard her. Okay, singles or doubles?
That's a great question. I would say singles because it is all dependent on you. You rise and
Mm-hmm.
fall alone out there, which is a solitary pursuit, but it can be very rewarding as well.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, how was your experience playing at Brown in one word or phrase?
Transformative.
Ooh, okay.
I feel like
What's
I
your
entered
Oh,
college as one person and I left as an evolved version of myself.
that's amazing. Okay, best sports movie.
Field of Dreams. I do
Ooh,
love a good classic sports film, and there's nothing better than that.
favorite tennis memory.
Committing to Brown.
Oh, that's nice. Pet peeve or one of your pet peeves.
I'm very germophobic, so when people don't wash their hands, I feel extremely uncomfortable.
Oh, I bet COVID was hard then.
It was very hard for me, yes.
Favorite pre-match meal or snack?
So I grew up eating two peanut butter sandwiches every day, and I have continued to do that. And I still would say that a peanut butter sandwich before a match just puts me in my element. I feel very present and ready to go.
I love that. Simple. And last question, favorite sport to cover besides tennis?
My boyfriend plays ultimate frisbee and he plays professionally, so
Ooh,
I do
wow.
love ultimate, and it's a great sport, and the atmosphere is unlike any other sporting atmosphere I've ever been to.
Really? How would you say it's different?
It's really inclusive and kind to people who don't normally or historically follow sports. It just feels like it's a place for
Oh.
people to gather and celebrate athletic achievement, and I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. My only experience playing ultimate frisbee was in like PE in middle school or high school, but it was always really fun. I That's really cool that you have that connection. Have you ever had him on your podcast or no, since it's just tennis?
That's a great question. I have never had him on my podcast, but
Yeah.
he is always welcome.
Oh. Okay, so now I'm just gonna get into kind of the first area or topic, which is just talking about your journey as a tennis player and leading up to the beginning of your career in sports media. So, I guess to start, how was your experience like playing at such a high level in college, playing at Brown?
When I came in as a freshman, tennis is an individual sport by nature. And so
Hmm.
in junior tennis, we all are individuals and we're competing for ourselves. And as soon as I came into Brown, it all shifted and I was playing for something bigger than myself. And I feel like at first that added a lot of pressure. At first, I felt
Hmm.
like everything I did on court had to represent the university. And I felt an extreme amount of both pressure, but also expectation for myself as a Brown student athlete. And throughout the years, I realized that I was there to have fun and that was going
Right.
to be the end of my tennis career, in
Hmm.
the competitive sense at least. And so I wanted to do everything I could to maximize that space. And that's actually what freed me up was trying to have fun out there.
Yeah. How long do you think that took you, like from the time that you were a freshman, not really knowing what to expect, to the time where you were like, you know what, I can take the pressure off. I'm here to have fun. I love my team, or I'm doing this for a bigger purpose than myself, but that's not something that's wearing on me. That's something that's like exciting. How long do you think that took?
It took me 2 years. It took me
Yeah.
my freshman, sophomore season of feeling very stuck and feeling like I was not able to swing through the ball. And then my junior year, my coach, Lucy Schmidhauser, who I absolutely adore, she's an incredible coach. She talked to me about the fact that, hey, at that point, I didn't realize I only had one more season left because of the pandemic, but at
Oh,
that point, I had
wow.
two
I
seasons
didn't think
left.
about that.
And she talked to the upperclassmen and she said, hey, you have 2 seasons left. How are you going to leave your legacy on these courts? And
Hmm.
it made me realize that if I was going to continue to play with my hands tied behind my back, say to speak, it was going to be a lot different of a result and probably one that I wasn't going to be super proud of.
Yeah, I've definitely fallen into that before, where you just get so caught into the routine of this is what I have to do to get better at my sport, and then you kind of lose that joy. of it. What would you say for people that, want to find, like maybe that don't have a coach like that, that gives them that like reality check of, you're not going to be playing your sport forever. Like, what would you say for people to kind of bring themselves to that without having someone tell them?
It comes from within yourself. And so I had so many supportive people during my college tennis career from the first moment to the last telling me
Hmm.
that they believed in me. But it took myself to believe in myself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure.
It took an internal change. And I think that's what I hope for all student athletes, that they're able
Hmm.
to have that shift from junior sports to college sports, because in a lot of ways, you're your own best advocate out there.
Right. Yeah, and at the end of the day, people can cheer for you all they want, but if you don't truly believe that, then it's not going to show. Or the opposite, they could be completely against you all they want, but if you have that internal belief, then you'll be good at the end of the day as well. So, kind of going along with that, what would be some of your best pieces of advice for somebody that wants to follow in your footsteps and play at a high level, how you did at Brown?
Be willing to fight. Be willing to fight for yourself and be willing to fight for your career as an athlete. Because I feel like a lot of times, especially in high school, we're torn between
Hmm.
academics, social life, athletic life. And I 10 out of 10 times was fighting for myself as a student athlete and balancing those two things. And I feel like a lot of us do that, right? Like we find that
Right.
balance. But in order to truly excel in my mind, you have to fight for yourself one extra round. You have to put yourself in that
Yeah.
position where, hey, I'm not going to get much sleep tonight, but it's going to pay off in the long run. It's kind of that delayed gratification
Hmm.
that I love to read about in those self-help books.
I feel you, girl.
But I mean, for real, as student athletes, we do that. I mean, we
Yeah.
have delayed gratification every day because we're practicing for something greater. We're practicing for the future. And that's something I still have in my life, even though I'm not actively competing anymore, is that I feel like everything I'm doing now for my media career is for the future.
Right. And it's like, honestly, when you get to the point where you accomplish what you wanted or set out to, it means more because you remember every day that you had to put into that, you know? Like if you just win a championship, but you didn't have all those memories of the hard times or the days it was hard to show up, then it doesn't mean as much, you know? And kind of going along with what you said, I mean, talk about balancing school and sports. You're studying at an Ivy League school at the same time as playing level sport. How was that experience?
I took classes that I loved, and so I felt academically motivated for all 4 years. And I feel like
I love that.
that choice, it was very intentional to take classes where, of course, there were huge struggles, academically,
Hmm.
because I was doing everything I could to just keep up with the workload. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I was taking things that I actively was enjoying and interested in and learning from incredible professors. And every lecture felt like a performance. And so when I would go
Aw.
to class, I actually not only wanted to be there, but I wanted to get to know my professors as people and say, hey,
Hmm.
how did you become so smart? I want to be like you. and
Right.
and that process actually allowed me to see the professors as people and not just see them as someone who is, giving me information, but more of having an active dialogue, going to their office hours and just learning more about them as people.
Do you think that the choice, your major was English, right?
I was English and I also did a lot of work in theater. So
Oh,
it was the
wow,
combination
cool.
of those two things that yeah, that really made me who I am.
Do you think that that was a lucky pick that you chose something and you happen to love those classes? Or do you think that going into, in your high school recruiting process and when you're touring schools and stuff, you knew that that was something that you would like?
I've been writing ever since I was in third grade, and
Mm-hmm.
I love writing children's books. I've written a number of manuscripts,
Oh,
and so I knew during the recruiting process that I wanted to go to a place that valued that. And there are not a ton of careers unless you're a children's book author or editor,
mm-hmm.
where you can be in that space
Right.
full time. And so I knew that I wanted to branch out beyond that, but I always knew that I wanted to write and tell stories. And Brown was the perfect place for that because I was surrounded by a lot of brilliant people who wanted to tell stories as well.
I love that. And I actually relate to that a lot. When I got to college, I always thought I was going to do something with sports. So I was thinking something in science, but then I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to be around injuries and just all of that types of stuff. But I was like, I love writing. So I kind of got lucky. But that's amazing that you just picked a major and it does make it so much more bearable when you like your professors. Like I just transferred to a new school this year. And I liked my professors at my last school as well, but my program here is like I actually look forward to going to class because I just feel like I've gotten to be a better writer and like learn so much. And it's just interesting. So that was just something I could relate to from, what you were saying. And then kind of going along with that, what would you say for people that are currently in the college tennis sphere, like that are playing or, in the thick of their career? What would be like your advice to them? Like, if you could go back and play right now, like, what would you do differently almost?
I think about that all the time. So this year in 2024, I've been lucky enough to go back to training and not training to compete, just training for myself. And
Oh,
it's been a lovely journey. And I feel like I've learned a lot about myself and about my body as an athlete. And I almost wish that I had trained in a similar sense when I was an athlete, because what I learned when I was at Brown was to work smart and not just work hard. Because
mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, we can train 24 hours a day, and then we could lose to someone who has only played 2 hours in practice. And so I really maximized my time on court over my 4 years at Brown. And now I've brought that training mentality to my current life as, I would say, someone who lifts, runs, does yoga. I mean, I don't have one specific sport, but whatever I do, I want to be really intentional and say, hey, I mean, look at HIIT workouts, high interval, high
Right.
intensity interval training, and that's 5 or 10 minutes and you're drenched. And so I realized I didn't need to, be on the court for 5, 6 hours a day sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
when I could probably have gotten that same intensity in an hour and a half.
Right. Just working efficiently.
Exactly. Working efficiently and working with intention, I would say, because a lot of times, especially in tennis, and I don't know if you feel this in college as well, but whether it be academic or athletic, we put so much time into what we're doing that I feel like it can become robotic in a way. And
Yeah.
what this time period has allowed me to do as an athlete is actually snap out of that robotic nature
Hmm.
and be intentional and literally choose whatever I want to do and put my 100% into that activity for it could be literally 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah. It's like the coming back to the creativity of the sport because every
Yeah.
sport is kind of an art form in a way. But I definitely agree with you with basketball. It's always, you actually have coaches that say, "Oh, you guys are playing like robots sometimes." Like when you come down and you say we have a set play and we're just running through the play, but you don't like react and make a read because you're trying to do the play right. Like you're always trying to do the right thing. So, how do you think like what are
And
how,
basketball is so much creativity.
it is. It's such a beautiful game, like when it's just you're in the flow of it. Like since coming home from college, I've just been playing a lot of like pickup basketball and stuff, and it's just such a fun sport. It like brings me back to my joy for the sport and everything. But in a way, I feel like tennis is like that too. Like you never know what's gonna happen, and like if a ball's coming at you really fast, it's not just one way for you to hit it back. It's like so many different ways you could position your body or whatever, get to that.
Yeah, and I had a coach who said that it's like you're painting a picture out there.
Yeah,
And, using variety, using slices, using drop shots. And it's very similar in basketball because you really are drawing up your own plays sometimes.
right. And there's so many different, like, if a defender guards you one way, there's so many different counters you could use or like moves you could use to get around them or ways you could score. But yeah, how do you think you came to that realization of coming and also along with that, how are you guided in your current life to like not be so rigid in your workouts?
I still struggle with that a lot. I think in
Hmm.
an ideal world, I would continue on that path of, making that selection every single day, making that selection every moment, because I
Right.
truly am choosing to work out. I don't have to. I don't have a coach right now, who's actively, making me go on the court and play. My boyfriend is my coach, in
Aw.
fitness and in life. But I've fallen back in love with choices, with the choices that you make to yeah, to be an athlete and to take up space in wherever, you're choosing to go. So whether it be, general training, whether it be, athletic achievement, it doesn't matter to me, but I think what helps me make those choices is by literally not being routined about it, if you know what I mean, and being super
Yeah, I
intentional
do.
about not committing to something before I do it, if you know what I mean. So if I put in my Google Calendar that I'm going to go for a run for an hour and 10 minutes before I decide I don't want to do that, I actually have the freedom now for the first time in my athletic career to not do that.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
amazing.
it's easy to fall back into the trap of, hey, I planned this out, I'm going to do it, and kind of have a robotic workout. And I've done that a million times as well since. So I'm currently trying to find the balance, and it's not easy. But I think
Hmm.
that my true joy in sport comes from making a choice all the way up until the time that I'm doing that activity.
Yeah, like staying present in your decision making almost.
Yeah.
And I also see that, and I don't know if this has just been drilled in our heads for so long since we're college athletes that like keeping like I like to keep my word to myself. Like if I say, "Oh, I'm gonna do something," I usually and I'm still in my career too, so it kind of does still matter a lot. But I like to do what I say I'm gonna do, like even if it's just like a promise to myself. But I think a big leap of like maturity for me has been learning how to listen to my body and kind of be guided more by my intuition of like, is this what I should be doing? And not always having to like ask someone else, hey, do you think I should go shoot today? Because I'm really drained, instead of just me saying, I need to take the day and I'm gonna have a better workout tomorrow.
Yes. And I also, as a student athlete, and still often look outside myself for validation of what I should be doing and what will help me as an athlete and what will help me get the most gains out of this lift or what will help me, increase my PR time as a runner. But at the same time, as you said, it comes down to ourselves. It comes
Hmm.
down to do we actually want to be doing what we're doing in that moment? And if not, how can we, oops, I dropped my earphones. How can we make an active change to make sure that we are continuing to listen to ourselves? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of having that balance of I really like routines and structure, but also having the creativity within that so that life stays fun and like not so, I guess robotic is, I don't know if that's the right word, but not so like monotonous, like boring, you know?
Yeah. And kind of sticking to this, I was literally just talking to my boyfriend about this yesterday, was how can we play all the time? How can we
Hmm.
create a space where we're being playful in athletics and in academics and in life and balancing those things? And I think that the art of balance is literally play. Is like, does this
Yeah.
feel like you're choosing to do this, or does this feel like you're doing it because you have to? Because sometimes, I mean, of course, as a student athlete, we go to practice, we don't want to, practice that day. It is what it
Hmm.
is. You have to show up. That's when
Right.
practice is. But I guess, on a deeper level, can we make other choices around those practice times that create freedom?
I guess I might as well put this in here. She has her own podcast as well, and I ran into all these technological issues, and she's just been so amazing in helping me figure them out. And so I'm actually recording on Zoom for the first time. I usually record on a different website, and so we're just navigating that whole process.
It's
But
not, it's a struggle out here. It's a struggle. It's always a struggle because I mean, we as artists are trying to create the best sound that we can, and it will never be good enough. So I completely understand.
yeah, I always think about if this is somebody's first time listening to my podcast, I want it to be a good experience that they'll want to listen again. But sometimes it's like you said, it's just certain things are out of our control that just happen. I'd love for every podcast to just be smooth, but we're learning. We're learning that we can record a Zoom and use that. So,
We're all learning
um,
together, yes.
but and also shout out, I'll give another shout out at the end. You guys should definitely tune into her podcast as well. It's called, what's it called again?
It's called On the Rise.
On the Rise, yeah. And she covers a bunch of different stories, including the one that your favorite tennis player to watch is on there, and numerous other successful tennis players that you guys can learn about. But now I'm just going to transition a little bit into kind of your post-grad journey and the beginning of your career in sports media. So how do you think that your experiences as a student athlete have translated to your new career?
Well, I did not have much time to transition. The day after I graduated college, I moved down to Virginia to start my broadcasting career. So
Oh, wow.
I had about 24 hours to shed my old identity, take on my new identity, and I can tell you that it was not a linear path. I'm still very much figuring out how to redefine myself as someone
Hmm.
other than a competitive athlete.
Hmm.
But my first year was certainly the toughest, I would say, moving to a new place, not knowing anyone, embarking on a career that, of course, I had never done full time before because I had always played tennis. But I think the biggest thing that I learned from the whole experience was that if you dive 100% into something and you do it with genuine intention,
Hmm.
then you will learn a ton. So even if it, even if it feels like it's, overwhelming, if you feel like you're drowning in the moment, it's actually because you're just learning everything all at once. And that's exactly what I did. I shot, wrote, edited, produced all my own content, anchored 3 shows a day.
Oh my
And
gosh, you're amazing. That's insane.
thank you. Well,
Wow.
I was going to say, and I relied heavily on my skills as an athlete because it basically was, as you talked about earlier, it's practice every day. And
Right.
I mean, talk about making choices of where I wanted to be at that moment. Oftentimes, I didn't want to be at the studio because I had been there for already 12 or 13 hours that day and I was tired.
Yeah, I bet.
But I was learning everything in this media industry. And so it was really helpful. And I think that time, that especially that first year, I was there for 3, but that first year was so formative in learning how to reestablish myself and how to communicate as a working professional, because before I was communicating through my internships as an athlete, but it's different when people don't see you as a tennis player and you walk out and you shake
Yeah.
someone's hand and they've never met you before, they don't know where you're from. I was learning how to establish myself as a human beyond tennis.
Yeah, that's really impressive. So what were your like you said you were anchoring three shows, but you were also writing and producing your own content. Was that um like the screenplays almost like the
The screencasts, yeah. So they're called newscasts.
yeah,
And yeah, it's very difficult in local news because local news across the country is understaffed, and so you often go in and you find yourself doing multiple people's jobs that at a bigger market or perhaps even at a national market, you probably wouldn't, be responsible for all of those things. But it's incredible what it teaches you. And I don't have
right.
any regrets about that time because I would have loved to learn all those things when I was in college. And how lucky am I that only, days out of college was I learning all of those things on the fly,
Right.
trial by
And
fire. But yeah.
mhm. And yeah, I already know that that was a lot, but that is super cool because then now, if you or when you work at a bigger industry, you're going to understand all those different components of what's going into it. So you might be the anchor, but you understand, like, oh, and even if somebody falls sick or something, you know how to fill in or you know how to make little tweaks and things that you probably wouldn't have had you not had that experience.
Yeah, and a mentor in the industry told me that I was in Virginia to learn how to tell a story. And over 3 years, I can say I did. I learned how to tell a story. I learned everything that goes into a story on your TV.
Wow, yeah. And there's certain things that you learn in college, at least within my major, about telling a story and writing for news and writing for like newspapers or different things. But I feel like unless you're actually under the fire and having to do it on a daily basis and meeting deadlines and all of that, then you don't have that same like the growth in that short amount of time that you probably did during that experience.
Mhm.
So, can you also tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you've been doing with that and your work with Cracked Rackets?
Of course. Well, so I started podcasting, similar to you, in my senior year of college. So you're already ahead of the game. The fact that you've already been podcasting as an active student athlete. But I was getting ready for my own transition from competitive sports to the world beyond. And honestly, I was terrified. I didn't really know where to turn because I felt like all of my mentors, who were lovely, were many years older than me. And I
Hmm.
didn't really know who I could talk to, people who were just a few years out of college and ask them, how did you do it? How did you let go of something that had been, for me, my first love was tennis, and how was I going to let that go and create something for myself beyond the tennis court? And so I didn't really think there was a live community of female athletes who were moving on from competitive sports. And so I started it. And I started this podcast out of completely it being a therapy method for me, basically
Yeah,
to heal
that's
from it
real.
as it was
Yeah.
happening. And I talked to other women and I realized they were all going through the same thing. And of course, I mean, you never want anyone else to be in the thick of it, but it made me realize that I wasn't alone and that this was something that needed to be talked about. And so I started, calling these women almost weekly to talk about this. And we
Hmm.
all kind of bonded together and I posted these episodes, and soon enough, I partnered with Behind the Racket with Tennis Channel, and so just bringing more, more eyes to, or more ears rather, to the podcast and trying to grow the audience, which I still am.
I love that. So how did you connect with the tennis channel and have your podcast linked to that?
So it started off as a partnership with Behind the Racket, which is a company I absolutely adore. I'm still with. They're a viral Instagram platform that talk about mental health journeys of professional tennis players. And so I was the sister podcast to that, doing it in the college space. And we at the time were also with Tennis Channel. And so I joined the Tennis Channel Podcast Network.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would love to find something like that for basketball, but my podcast, I guess, is more it's not just specific to a sport. So I don't know, but
And I love that. No, I love
yeah,
that. I mean, I love what you're doing because I feel like it's super applicable and people can, especially listeners can tune in who don't necessarily come from a specific sport. They just
right.
want to learn about the athlete experience.
I've actually realized that it's not even just athletes, that it's a lot of like even my mom and grandma's friends will come up to me and start talking about it. I'm like, oh, like this is kind of cool. Like not like it was my intention to cater to like a huge audience, but it's kind of nice that it's so diverse in the sports that it kind of does naturally.
Yes.
But what would you say like inspired you to go into sports media, to be a sports journalist and do what you've been doing now?
So it happened in college. I did 10 internships across the sports media landscape, and I wanted to figure out if I want to be in front of the camera or behind the camera. And I realized pretty quickly as soon as I started acting at Brown that I wanted to continue performing and see if I could find that same rush, honestly, that happened with competing. And so
Hmm.
I felt like the closest I could get, definitely not the same, but the closest I could get was on air work. And so I started doing internships in that space. And I did an internship where I covered the Patriots. I covered Tom Brady's last season as a Patriot
Oh
for New England, which
wow.
was a wild internship. I mean, I would get back from Patriots games at 2 a.m. and then I would have 6 a.m. practice. And it was the
That is
coolest
so
fall.
cool.
It was the coolest fall semester I've ever had. It was the fall of my junior year, and that really set the stage for my broadcasting career because I saw my mentors in that space doing what they were doing and not sleeping, barely eating, living this very nomadic life. But I also saw the reward in it and
The excitement of just
the excitement.
the like adrenaline of having to or being able to cover that. How cool is that you got the opportunity to do that while in college too? That's super cool.
It was very cool. Yeah.
I think like as athletes, sometimes it's hard to find those types of internships because of our schedules. And it's hard to like commit. Or if sometimes I've found myself in the past committing to so many things that it's like I'm spread too thin across, you know?
I was too in college. I know. And it's hard because we want a lot out of ourselves every day. And in order to do that, or, we talked about expectations before. And Grace, I had a lot of expectations for myself when I became a college athlete. And it only increased as I became an upperclassman. And so,
Right.
right. I mean, I was spread too thin, but I was loving it. I was loving everything I was doing. And it was hard for me to let go of anything. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I was like a ball of stress and
Aw.
I have red hair and so it just looked like it all the time. But I definitely feel
Aw.
like it was the right decision to continue with all of those avenues and help me get to where I am today.
And also, it's just amazing that it was all things that you loved. Like that really makes the difference. If you're spread too thin and it's a bunch of classes you hate, something you're doing some hobby or side thing that your parents are forcing you to do, you don't like your sport, then it would become a really difficult life. On top of already having to expend energy all the time, the fact that it would be things that you didn't want to do, but it makes all the difference that you were so passionate about all of these different things you were doing.
Yeah.
And last main question, what would be your advice for people, specifically athletes, female athletes, those interested in sports, etc., to build a presence within the sports media realm and industry?
Start reaching out on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been my best friend throughout my sports media career because I have found so many incredible, kind mentors through this digital platform. And so it's there. And I mean, for people who, who don't know LinkedIn, it's this place where everyone talks about their, I want to say academic, it's academic, athletic, career achievements, really achievements anywhere. And it can make you feel small at least. And it did for me. But then I realized there's another way to look at it that you can
Hmm.
also scroll through your feed and say, hey, I do want to be like this person. I wonder if they'd
Mm-hmm.
talk to me. And then that has opened so many doors. I've gotten internships through calls on LinkedIn, through cold calls. So I would
Wow.
say that LinkedIn is the place to be.
So how would you reach out to those people? Like you would just message them and
Yeah,
say, I
so
really love what you're doing.
exactly. So I would look at their experience, see what part of their experience, really spoke to me, and then I'd talk to them about it.
That's awesome. I've connected with a couple people on LinkedIn, but I've never like really ventured out to network that way. So that's really good advice. And I think especially for young athletes, because it's not really something like we talk about amongst each other. It's more things that we see the adults have or professors have or those types of people. So yeah, thank you so much for that advice. And thank you so much for your time on the podcast today, for helping me navigate the technological issues as they came, and just for all of your amazing responses. I think that this is going to help a lot of people and reach a lot of people. Hopefully, people that play tennis, a whole different audience of people that I haven't yet specifically catered to. Um, and do you have any closing advice or words that to end on?
Yeah, I would say that I love what you're doing and that I would
Oh, thank
love to help
you.
spread the word. And I feel like you're a great interviewer and you have a lot of potential as someone who can connect with athletes because you know what they've been through. And so it's been really special getting to know you today and seeing how you're able to connect with me as another athlete.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you as well and just all the work that you're going to do now and in the future and the growth of the tennis industry field, all of that. And you guys should definitely give her a follow. Peri Sheinin. It's no periods or anything, right?
Nope.
So I'm going to spell it out for them. It's PeriSheinin. And also, you guys should follow her on her podcast account, which is at on the rise underscore pod. And all of that is going to be linked in the description on this podcast, on all the different platforms it's on. And also, I'm going to be tagging her in all of the promo content for it. So you guys will definitely see it. Again, thank you for coming on. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode and stay tuned for the next episode on the Live with Grace podcast.